when you're working on how to have your home be a Montessori-friendly environment, one of the things you've got to look at is storage. Storage of your children's belongings, and including toys, but not just toys. And if you are setting up a Montessori environment in your home where you are actually having a space where Montessori materials are being used by your children, you need to make sure that you've got that organized in a way that works for you as well. So what I'm going to talk about in this segment is how you can both set up an environment so that the children who use the materials, the toys, the clothes, whatever, can manage it themselves, and also how that can keep things more interesting for them in terms of both Montessori materials, but especially their toys, which is more the focus of what we're going to talk about here. So what you can see here are some boxes that I use for storage, not for storage while children are using things, but for when things are put away. Now, it looks like they're kind of attractive, not terribly, but a little bit. If you are familiar with banker's boxes, here's a couple of different styles that I've purchased. Easier to handle when you're not trying to film than when you are. But these are two different examples of ones that I've purchased from just a Costco. And if they are left unpainted, they are perfectly functional. If they're painted, it's a little bit easier to use them if the storage that you're doing is visible. I've used these in a painted version a couple of different times. One is in a Montessori school environment where there was not a lot of cabinet storage, and storage had been added by actually salvaging doors and mounting them up high in the classroom itself, and then using that as a storage space. So with the darker boxes, it was not very obvious and didn't draw the eye up to where where the teachers didn't want the children's eye to be. Also, if you have open storage shelves, this can make it a little bit more attractive to use for your storage. So these are some different options for storage boxes for rotating materials. Now, I include children's toys along with those materials. And you'll see that the label that I've got on that middle box says Rotate Out September. Now, that's just a super sticky Post-it note. Regular ones will tend to come off of a painted box like this. The super sticky ones stay on really nicely until you pull them off, and then they come off easily. Now, the reason that I talk about that at the beginning of this segment is most children in our environment have more toys than they can manage and more toys than they really need at any one time. So one of the best ways to deal with that is to take some of the toys that they are throwing all over the floor and complaining about when it's time to clean up, and just pack them away. Pack them away, rotate them out again, and it's all very exciting and new because they haven't seen them in a while. So that is one of the things that I'm definitely going to suggest that you do. Now, if you have older children, you may want to involve them with this process. Usually with my younger children, I just pack some away and then they would show up again. And if they requested some, of course, I would pull them out of the boxes that were in storage. But that's one of the ways that you can, first off, make the environment more manageable. Now, once you've got a manageable set of materials, if they are Montessori materials, you're going to set them out on the Montessori shelves. We're not going to talk about that in this segment so much. We're going to talk more about a child's home environment. So then how are we going to make their toys, their clothes, things like that more available so that they can manage them themselves. But if it were Montessori materials that you were rotating out and storing, they would of course be set out on the shelves. So then that's quite an idea. Why is it that most Montessori environments, the children take things off the shelves, use them, and put them back, but it's not always the way that it happens at home? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that that's the routine that's been set up at the school. That's what they were shown from the time that they started using those materials, so that's just the normal procedure. But the other thing is how things are stored. if your children's toys are stored on shelves and each toy has a place, it's going to be much easier for them to put them away in an orderly fashion. Toy boxes, toy hammocks, big tubs for toys are not really something that makes it easy for children to keep their toys orderly. Now, I'm going to show you something just about storing toys. If you do have perhaps a limited number of bins, tubs, whatever, to put the toys out in for your children, then when you store them away, you may want to use Ziploc bags to store them away in the larger boxes. You may want to use plastic tubs that are really too flimsy for the children, that they're likely to break those even with regular wear and tear. Those would be good ways to store things away when they are being rotated out. Now, when the child is using the toys, you're going to want something that's easy for them to use the toys with and then put them back on the shelf. That's typically the way it's going to make it easiest for them to use them. Now, there certainly is a place for tubs, but you're going to want smaller tubs that would be for one toy or one set of toys. If you've got toys that a set will fit on a tray, then that's a good way, just the same way that things are stored in a Montessori classroom. Now, sometimes a tub with a lid is a fine way to store things. Sometimes games come with a box that is not real easy to use. This is Rivers, Roads, and Rails. I'm not even sure if it's a game that's still available, but I found that it was much easier for the children to put the game away in this little Tupperware food container than it was in the box, and so that's the reason that we stored it like that. And I think these were just some extra pieces that didn't fit in. They were added in like that for a while, and they seemed to find that there were too many pieces, so I pulled them out again. So realize that you need to help make sure that your children have the ability to manage their own toys. Same thing goes with clothes. If they have shelves or drawers that are down where they can get to them, where they can put things back in their own places, they're going to have an easier time doing that. If they have to climb, if they have to ask someone to get things down from a closet bar that's tall enough that they can't get to them, that's going to be more of a problem for them. Now, what about natural materials versus plastic materials? Where we can, we like to use natural materials. This is one way to set out the child's games. You've got a little natural basket with all the pieces that are needed, and it can just be set out with its board. Now, this is where some of my natural materials are being used right now because I don't have children in my home. I have a dog. So if I were to be having her toys be out, they would be out in this basket. If I were to switch them out, I'd put these toys away in the cupboard or whatever and then put some more out in the basket. You can do the same thing with your children's toys. If you have a limited number of nice baskets or natural wooden bins, you can store the toys out in those while the children are using them and then rotate them off into the cardboard boxes or even plastic bins and things like that if that's what you have, so that you can help keep the environment in a state where your children can maintain it more than you, and that they have an ability to maintain order on their own within their environment. In the previous segment, when I talked about using your time over your school break to get ready for the next school year, I mentioned that it's really good to make a list of the things that you have noticed you need in your classroom, whether it's something that's just missing, that's a core part of the Montessori curriculum, or whether it's some containers that you want to replace that aren't ideal for what you've been using. It's really nice to have that list of the things that you would like to add into the classroom before you're there the next year or as soon as possible. So in this segment, I'm going to talk a little bit about containers, most specifically, a little bit on some other things, but especially about containers in the classroom. Now, before I show you some examples of ones that I think are particularly nice and discuss why they are, I do encourage you to seek a balance between whatever is the present state of your classroom and anything that has kept you from having everything you want in there and making it a little nicer at least every year if you can. Please don't break the bank. Please don't go into debt to get nicer containers in your classroom if you have some that are working. If you have donated containers, ones that you found, ones you saved from food, ones that are plastic that you got at yard sales, if they're working okay now, then have a plan to bump them up to something nicer in a way that works for you and is not going to create more stress, such as going into debt can do. So I want this segment to be about choosing containers when you have that chance, but also about refining them. So noticing that you could maybe switch some out, particularly from year to year, and make them a little nicer as you discover, particularly if you discover nice ones at yard sales, thrift stores, and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about containers and storage in the classroom. One of the things that I found is vertical storage in the classroom is always something nice to have. This is a napkin holder. Here's another one. Magazine holders. This is a business kind of a vertical storage that I'll talk about in a minute. But vertical storage is pretty much anything that has the things in your classroom being stored upright. So in this napkin holder that I have in my hand, I could have small books in there. I could have one large book in there. I could have cards. I could have any number of things. And one of the advantages, of course, is space, because you are able with vertical storage to fit more things into a smaller space. But vertical storage also is really great for managing a large number of things, such as books. If you have a lot of books, and particularly if you're arranging the books the way that I recommend, and most Montessori teacher trainers recommend, educator trainers recommend, is having those books in the area where they belong. So all of your books on plants are in your botany area, not just in a library shelf or something. These kinds of containers can be wonderful for fitting in small sets of books into the environment where you would like them to be. So as I said, this is a beautiful bamboo napkin holder and very low-key, could fit into pretty much any area. There's no color coding that would say that it goes for a particular place in the classroom. So that's a really easy thing to look for in thrift stores and yard sales. People get rid of napkin holders all the time in my experience. Now sometimes you'll find that there will be something kind of special about one. This one has strawberries carved into it. So of course it's a beautiful one to have in your botany area. This is one of those things to keep an eye out for that's just going to make the books that are sitting there or the cards that are sitting there, the booklets, more attractive to the child because the container is beautiful. Now, I mentioned that this segment is at least partly about shopping, yard sales, and things like that. There are a lot of wonderful IKEA containers that are not available anymore. And I did happen to buy quite a few of their wooden magazine containers, regular retail price, which is quite reasonable, but then I found a lot of them at a thrift store as well. So this is a wonderful way to store not only magazines, if you have things like children's magazines or some sort of mini books that are in a magazine format, as well as booklets that you might make yourself that are 8.5 by 11 size. These are wonderful for storing that. Now, on that same IKEA theme, I'm going to diverge a little bit and then come back to that vertical storage idea. anytime you have boxes with lids, that is quite the bonus. Now, the most obvious reason that a lid is nice is because it does cut down on the dust collection in the materials, and it keeps your materials themselves nicer. This is an example of a box with a lid from IKEA. I've found that when purchasing them directly from the store, checking the bathroom storage is always good, as well as, of course, the kitchen and the office storage. But boxes with lids, if you find yourself buying more containers than what you really need, one nice way to kind of cut it down and say, oh my goodness, I know I have more than I need, but oh, it's so cute, it's so pretty. Confine yourself. It has to be ready to use. You can't have to go home and paint it or clean it up real well. And then if you want to confine yourself a little bit more, just stick to really nice containers that have lids. And that will cause you to kind of focus yourself in a little bit more. Now, the last IKEA piece that I'm going to mention, again, this is one of those boxes that is not available anymore, so far as I know. But this is a wonderful book box. If you are checking out books from the library, having something like this that even possibly if you have a handy parent could make something like this for you. This is wonderful to be able to get the books from the library, have the children keep them in the box so that the ones that go back to the library don't belong in your classroom itself are sorted for you. So it's easier for you once a week, once every 2 weeks to gather up the library books, take them back to the library. You can, of course, put them around the classroom and have a child in charge of collecting up the library books. It just depends on what's going to be easier for you. And I found lots of other uses for this box as well. If you do art prints on 11 by 11 cardboard, something that I've talked about in some other segments, this is a great way to store those in the classroom as well. So back to vertical storage. This is an example of it's plastic. A lot of office materials are plastic, but this is really nice vertical storage. I have no idea how old this is because I bought it from a thrift store, and it's really nice because the little vertical inserts are removable so you can adjust the space a little bit. And one of the things I found about some of the office storage that you will find in the thrift stores is that some of it is much sturdier than what you will typically buy new now. So in some ways, some of it's even nicer. We've talked about this in other episodes, even some of the metal storage that you might find there. Now, a little bit of a shift on vertical storage. This is from the thrift aisle at Target. You can't call it a dollar aisle anymore because this was one of the objects. I think it was $2.50. And anyway, it's not a dollar. They do go on sale, and so particularly if you notice some things that are in the $2.50 section that you think, well, I'd certainly buy it if it was a dollar, but not sure if I'm going to buy it for that watch, because they do tend to go on sale when they're getting ready to switch things out. But this is a little metal container, and it is well worthwhile because it's a good storage for your maps, your timelines. Now, what I have here is a map chart combination from National Geographic. That's one reason that the container being blue is kind of nice. And I have found that if you want the maps and charts that you get out of National Geographics to last, it's really good to roll them and preferably to laminate them and roll them. If a child is using them and has to fold them up again and again and again, the places where the maps get folded are going to tear. It's going to make it more easy to tear. It's going to get worn there. This happens to be a chart of the layers of life, and then a map of the Gulf of Mexico and the oil that's being drilled there. So this is just an example of a way that you can store these things, one or more, in the classroom in an upright fashion. And then the last thing that I'm going to mention is it's always nice to look for natural material containers. And I'm going to show just a few of those to finish up this segment. Now, this one's kind of unusual. I bought it at a discount store. I'm not even sure which one, a few years ago, but it's actually made of metal and then with a kind of a grass kind of material woven around it. So it's really sturdy, but it's also natural materials rather than plastic, and beautiful in the botany area, of course, because of the green. So this is the kind of thing that if you are thinking about sturdiness, natural materials, all those kinds of things, it can help you refine your shopping for containers. And I'm just going to show these two. Both of them are lovely natural trays, is what I would say. This one is a little bit more flimsy. And so if you were going to use it, you'd want very light materials in there, and you'd want to teach the children to handle it very carefully. This one is about 25, 30 years old, and you can see it certainly, shows the wear, but it's lasted really, really well. And if you find a nice large rectangular basket, you'll almost certainly find some good uses for that. And that's the last quality I'm going to suggest that you look for in your materials. Given that so much that we store in the Montessori classroom is square, rectangular cards, booklets, things like that, it's nice to have things that are rectangular or square rather than round. They also do save space. So some of the qualities you're going to want to look for are natural materials, sturdiness, lids, rectangular or square shapes, and vertical storage. So I wish you happy hunting as you shop thrift stores and yard sales for containers that may beautify and make your classroom more functional. Not that long ago, I was in the position of taking over the responsibility for being the lead educator in an upper elementary Montessori classroom in a public school, a charter public school. And it was a huge responsibility. I found that it challenged me on several different levels. I had a lot of Montessori background. I had taught older children within an elementary classroom that mostly included younger children, but that was my first time teaching children from age 9 to 12 and being responsible for the Montessori curriculum for children who would be the equivalent of 4th, 5th, and 6th graders in the United States. Not only was I responsible for teaching them the Montessori curriculum, but I was also responsible for the state standards for the school where I was teaching, because that's the nature of teaching Montessori in a public school. And I found myself completely overwhelmed. If it wasn't parent communication or a behavioral challenge in the classroom or not knowing how to keep track of the progress on all of those state standards for which I was responsible, making sure the children made progress, it was just the whole situation of that new routine. I have found that if you do everything for someone, it's not a good thing. They don't learn very well, but I've also found that if you expect someone to do more than they can possibly do in the hours that they have available, they are definitely not going to succeed nor serve the children in the best way. So I have created something that I am calling a Montessori co-op, a co-op for consulting that allows those schools that have educators starting out or who are very new to the Montessori classroom to have some of those responsibilities done for them and to have a way to check in, a way to have observations done by an experienced Montessori educator who can give them good feedback and help them learn how to find the solutions that they need. If you are looking for parent newsletters, lesson plans, correlation from the Montessori curriculum to the Common Core state standards of the United States, this is something that I can help you with. Our cooperative can allow you for a very reasonable amount of money to have some of these things done for your teachers. Allow them to be at their best. Allow them to learn from where they're starting. Meet them where they are. Let them have Montessori education be as joyful an experience as you are seeking to provide for the students in your school. If we can help you, we are happy to be that resource that lets your students and your teachers make the most of the coming school year.